Olá, muito boa tarde. Sejam
Good
todas muito
afternoon.
bem-vindas.
Welcome,
Sejam todos
everyone.
muito bem-vindos ao
Welcome
Fórum
all
SBCOP,
to the
liderança do
SB
setor
COP
privado
Forum,
para a COP31,
leadership of
uma
the private
realização da
sector for
Confederação
the
Nacional da Indústria,
COP31.
CNI, com
This
apoio,
is
com os
made
apoios do
by
Instituto
the
Amazônia Mais 21
Industry
e do
National
Facility de Investimentos
Confederation,
Sustentáveis.
supported by the Facility
Informamos
of
que este evento
Sustainable
conta com
Events.
serviço
This
de tradução
event
simultânea
has
e os aparelhos estão
simultaneous
disponíveis ao
translation,
fundo
and the
deste
headsets
auditório.
are
Informamos
available at
também que
the
este
back
fórum
of
está sendo
the
transmitido para o canal do
auditorium.
YouTube da
This
CNI
is
em
also being
português e em
transmitted
inglês. Então,
to
você que nos
the
acompanha online,
YouTube
seja também muito
CNI
bem-vindo.
channel in English and in
A Sustainable
Portuguese. So
Business
if you're
COP,
listening online,
SBCOP, é
welcome.
uma ação global do clima da
This event is an
UNFCCC,
event of
voltada à
the
mobilização do setor privado
UNFCCC.
para acelerar a implementação
It's
climática. Este fórum tem como objetivo
this
fortalecer o
forum has the
papel do
goal of
setor privado
strengthening the
na
role of private
implementação da
sector
agenda
and
climática global
implementing
e
the
contribuir para a
global
construção de uma
climate
agenda de
agenda
ação da
and help
COP31
to build an
orientada à
agenda
execução,
for
à
the
mobilização
COP31
de capital, à
to
articulação de soluções
execute,
concretas
to
e ao
articulate
engajamento
concrete
empresarial em
solutions
escala.
and
Esta iniciativa
in
busca também
scale
apoiar a continuidade
business
entre os ciclos das COPs,
endeavorments.
conectando o legado da
We
mobilização
intend
empresarial já
to help
construída
the
pela
legacy
SBCOP,
of
as prioridades
business
da COP31 e
in
ao caminho
sustainable
de
projects
implementação
and
até
the
Antalya,
pathway
na
to
Turquia, cidade
Antalya
onde será
and
sediada a
Turkey,
próxima
where
COP.
the next COP will
Para a abertura
be
deste fórum,
seated.
convidamos ao palco
For
o
the
Head
opening
of
of this
Climate
forum, we
Channel
have
da COP30, Dan
high-level
Yoshpi.
climate channel Dan Yoshpi.
Convidamos também o membro do Conselho
Also, we will
Consultivo,
invite
secretário-geral
the
das
consultative
Nações Unidas
member
e assessor sênior do campeão
and
de
senior
alto nível para o clima
accessor
da
advisor
COP31, Carlos
for
Silva.
the COP31, Carlos Silva.
Convidamos o chair da
Also, we'd like
SBCOP,
to invite
Ricardo
the chair of
Mussa.
SBCOP, Ricardo Mussa.
Convidamos a
Also,
diretora da Agenda de Ação da COP30,
we'll
Bruna
invite
Cerqueira.
Bruna Cerqueira.
O superintendente de Meio Ambiente e Sustentabilidade da CNI,
The supervisor and sustainability, David Boncampo.
Podem ocupar os seus lugares. Convidamos então para as
So, would
boas-vindas
like to
o
invite
superintendente de Meio Ambiente
the Superintendent of
e Sustentabilidade da
Environment
CNI,
and
David Bontempo.
Sustainability from CNI, David Bontempo.
Muito boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's always a pleasure seeing you all.
Efetivamente a nossa semana
We are beginning our climate week here in São Paulo. It's a broad approach from SBCOP and the events supported by CNI. Today we've had a previous meeting in the morning, a partnership with the World Economic Forum in a more restricted event, but that brought several opportunities in terms of contribution when we talk about green skills and jobs, some opportunities, challenges, and some opportunities to integrate with this movement. It's an issue that has been surprising CNI through the COPs. We are organized in the Blue Zone Pavilion with several organizations, and this theme has been getting a lot of traction. We will see in the second part of today. It approaches several transversal themes, and we intend to avoid these total stop when we talk about green economies. When we are going towards a green economy, and the issue is, are we ready to welcome it? Also, I'd like to thank the presence of Dan, Bruna, Musa, and Carlos. Carlos has been working with CNI for a while in terms of waste agenda in a more global perspective. But today the idea is to bring this information and improve what we have in terms of agenda, green skills and jobs. I think that I'd like to welcome once again you all. I think the MC is going to speak now.
Obrigado, Davi. Vamos ouvir agora a diretora da Agenda de Ação da COP30, Bruna.
Thank you. Now we'll hear the director of the CNI agenda, Bruna Cerqueira. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm performing my role of gender balance here in the opening panel. We have at least a woman, but first of all, I'd like to say congratulations to the whole CNI team. We see from COP to COP with these coalitions being formed, and afterwards nothing happens. But what we see with SBCOP is much more than continuity. SBCOP is strengthening, it's working with its governance framework. We started with advocacy, and now what are we going to deliver? So it's really important to have this coalition because it was lacking before. We have several projects working with sustainability in companies, but bringing the CNIs of all the world, this logics of thinking of things in a more strategic way, it's really important and makes a lot of difference. Very briefly, and Dante is going to talk about this. We brought from the COP30 work in terms of the space of what the negotiators bring to the table, of the private sector, social society, to speed up solutions. And Dan was our champion in this sense, with a very well set structure, with the plans to accelerate the solutions, and we need to keep on this pathway. At COP30, there was this umbrella for several industry initiatives, which is the global green industrialization. There was a declaration in Belém. When we talk about the industry carbonization, we start talking about green industrialization to talk about development. And this group is strengthening more and more. And in COP31, it's going to have a new governance. But part of this, it's that it's going to create an annual report about the green industry centered at UNIDO, which is the UN entity that is going to centralize all this information. And we have the breakthrough agenda that came from COP26, and they just launched a report from last year to this year, talking about several industries, cement, steel, and so on. And they found 3 things that we need to work from now on. Not that we need, but where countries are engaged. You have a regulation space, so we need more ministers to look upon it in a more political way, because several bottlenecks are linked to the regulations. The second thing is that we need to differentiate what is national policies. We are at São Paulo Climate Week. What can we do in terms of Brazil that we don't need international players, and what do we really need for international cooperations to make things happen, such as standards or purchase clubs? What is really making, how things make a difference? And the third thing is an alignment between the results that we want and what we put on table to make these things happen. So several of these plans have the idea of creating the green steel and so on, but when you look at this, the actions are we're going to create an event or a study, and that doesn't really take us where we need to go. But we need to start on implementation pathway. Thank you.
Obrigado, Bruna. Ouviremos a seguir o chair
Thank
da
you, Bruno.
SBCOP, Ricardo
Now
Mussa.
we'll hear the chair of SBCOP, Ricardo Mussa. Thank you, Bruna. Thank you for your presence. Thank you, Dan. I always remind everybody, especially those who are hearing online, that Dan is who really, he's the spark of SBCOP. Yesterday, last year, we had the SBCOP 30, and we just removed the 30 because it's something permanent, and it's growing, and it's more organized for this process. So first of all, we would like to reflect upon this. I always talk about my frustration when we are at the private sector and we are organizing things, we want to be swifter and be more direct. And when we talk about climate, it's a lot harder. We never had a situation with so many countries, and it's hard to make the agenda go forward quickly. But when I look back now, today, this morning, I was with the CII, the India Industry Confederation, and it's amazing to see how engaged they are with SBCOP and making things go forward. So we started influencing indirectly other countries in the world and making things happen. So, but there's still a lot to go forward. So I'll do a brief presentation. Today, we have 68 countries represented by SBCOP. We have 72 confederations, 45 million companies represented by these countries, and we have a link with the Marrakesh Partnership. Today, the UNFCCC is the sector of UN that takes care of climate, and it really grew this year. This is the table of all the CNIs throughout the world, the institutions that are part of this SBCOP. The SBCOP Council, we have 68, now it's 72 CNIs representing 68 countries. We have it from China, US Chamber, the South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and you can imagine how it is, how a council is when you have 68 different countries with the polarization that we have today with the US and China. But what's the positive things? The private sector is much more efficient to find common pathways. So one of the clarities of SBCOP is the kind of organization that we have. Although we have a specific kind of organization, it works, and we have institutional partners. We'll have HSCC, we have World Bank, and several other partners of Bloomberg and so on, helping us in this agenda. First of all, we focused on the big countries. Now we're going after the smaller countries. Several countries do not have their industry confederation. In some Caribbean countries, they don't have industry. But we know that every country has a vote within the UN. So we're bringing to SBCOP the smaller countries. So our goal until the end of October, early November, is to have 100 countries represented by their associations, and until 2029, all UN countries represented by their trade and industry federations or associations. So the CNI team is helping in the secretariat. The SBCOP does not belong anymore to CNI. It has in its council all its associations in their and we, for 3 years, we organized the secretariat, we provided the budget, so it's an institution. Now we are hiring people to work at SBCOP. It will have a headquarters in Brussels, we'll hire a CEO, and it will carry on existing as a separate entity. Meanwhile, we are helping the early stages of this of SBCOP. And last year we had 8 working group where we invited 8 Brazilian CEOs to be chairs, and they invited other CEOs. Had around 300 CEOs creating the SBCOP. Today we have a change. I want to spend a while to explain this image. We decided to be 100% aligned with the UN goal. So we're using the same name, the same title, the same words that is in the action agenda. So instead of having 8 working groups, we have 6 work groups that enables and makes it easier the communication with UN, with the champions. So we learned that let's align 100% our work with the UNFCCC, and it will help a lot the debates that we have. And you will see a few sub-items throughout COPs. Now we have a Turkey COP. For instance, Turkey is emphasizing electrification and circularity. So we will adapt without losing the backbone of the process. When we go to Ethiopia, if they prioritize other themes, we'll adapt, but without losing the backbone. And one of the legacies that Dan and Bruno's team gave the world is creating a perennial agenda for 5 years that we'll be working on. So we'll learn with champions, aligning with us in the same way, adapting for each one of the COPs. These are the working groups that will be working this year. Our task forces totally align with the action agenda and the deliverables. We have 3 deliverables. At the end, I'll pass it around for you. The first one is the letter to the COP presidency this year. The negotiation is with Australia. The action agenda is with Turkey, and as we will deliver to Mr. Murakurum in the last week of September a recommendation of SBCOP for each one of the 6 groups of action agendas. So this is the first formal delivery that we are going to do this year. The second delivery is what we call case selection. Last year, we had the SBCOP award. We received from all over the world, not projects, but success cases of the private sector. Can you imagine? We have so many success cases throughout the world. One of the main legacy of SBCOP is creating this huge network to bring success cases to show governments what is working and help in the solutions for public policy. So this year we're repeating this, we're emphasizing even more the SBCOP award. So those who are watching us, send us your success case. Last year we received several cases, but several projects. We left the projects aside to focus on the success case. And we have many good projects, and we will also this year have a space for projects. We have success case and also good projects. Those workforces, they have the responsibility to write a recommendation to select the best cases and the best projects. The success cases that are selected will have a lot of visibility. We'll present in the COP in the Blue Zone. We will send it to BBC, Reuters, and other news agencies, and we'll have a selection process. You can imagine the political pressure on the selection team, but this is part of the process. And the last part that is really important is the detail of the pass, the the plans to accelerate solutions, and we participate actively in accelerating solutions, and these are the three deliverables. The first one is at the end of September, the second is during COP, and the third one will be along the month of October. And we do this to have time to do an advocacy with the countries of what's important. This is the timeline and that we had in London. We had a very productive week, and New York is a huge milestone. Then we have a pre-COP that must be in Fiji. We don't know exactly how the process will be, and then we'll have the COP Italia in the 2 weeks of November. We have here the QR code. If you'd like to suggest members, every working group and task force, we have a consulting team that helps us with this. And what's nice to be a member of this group, we have access to information, and it's a very rich material. It will be only 3 or 4 meetings. One happened from here to the end of the year, when this group really gets together to write recommendations and select cases. So if those would like to be part of, and also one of the SB COP Awards projects. If you'd like to send success cases and projects to be selected, this is in a database, so it really gives visibility. So this is just an update of what we're doing, but as Bruna said, our role is to deliver concrete things. I'm not really satisfied with the work that
personally very satisfied
that has done, because I still think we still have a lot of governance work to do, which is annoying work to be done, but I hope that next year we can talk about more concrete deliveries, but the pathway is very good and we are really satisfied. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ricardo. Right now, we will listen to the member of the consultative group, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and the high-level representative for COP31, Carlos Silva. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the kind invitation to be here with you in this afternoon, bringing a message from our climate champion for COP31, Magabat. A warm greetings to him in Turkey. Due to some unfortunate events, he was not able to be here with us in this climate event, but he requested me to represent him and bring this special message. First, to congratulate the CN9 in the name of David, Ricardo, Dan, and Bruna for the constitution of SB COP. This is a topic that has been showing increasingly important for us to fulfill what was, so to say, determined for Turkey to deliver this year, which is to accelerate the action agenda. So this is an important starting point, because when the champion was nominated and this global agenda for climate action came about, many people were discussing what was to be done with it, if it was going to continue, how to continue. And one of the commitments established by him was that not only we were going to continue, but we were also going to strengthen it and accelerate the agenda after the work that was being done on COP30 that leaves us after the global stocktake in the guidance map of how to bring all these topics about in a coordinated way. So this is the first commitment. And the second commitment is precisely the role that we see today, the necessary role to develop this so that this action agenda is implemented. And after these dialogues in the specific forum, so that we can feed this action agenda, and this action agenda may guide the negotiation process. So this is a little bit of what we're talking about here, and this is the commitment. And in that sense, what the champion asked us to share with you is that precisely the role of the industry, the role of businesses is key for this agenda to be developed, because throughout the world, a new industrial transformation is already ongoing. We see companies redesigning their supply chains, investing in cleaner technologies, financial institutions reorienting their investment portfolios, governments adopting industrial strategies that may foster this whole transition. So when we're talking about leaving a moment of commitment and going into an implementing moment, what we see is this industry forums are precisely doing this and making this happen. That's why COP31 is so important. After the moment we built the bridge from Belém to Antalya, the focus is very clear that it's precisely the implementation. The climate debate evolved, even though the ambition is still essential. The greatest challenge today is to transform commitments into investments, strategy into project, innovation into concrete benefits for people and communities. And COP31 intends to be the moment in which ambition will meet implementation. But it's important to remember that implementation itself is not the final goal. This is not our final destination. The final destination is to build stronger economies, more competitive industries, quality jobs, more resilience, and a better quality of life for people, because the true purpose of industrial transformation is not only decarbonize the economy, but also improve the lives of people. That's why the relevance of the global agenda for the green industrialization that Bruno mentioned, that precisely a successful industrial transition will improve the lives of people, at the same time reduce emissions. What we are proposing through the Champions team is not only the creation of declarations, but the development of public policies that are predictable, the development of harmonized standards, the fostering to accessible financing and funding, and trustful partnerships. That's why the champion asked me to open this channel and be at your disposal so that this dialogue may happen. And what we have been developing and building towards COP31 is precisely the vision of how to accelerate and build more strength for the transformation agenda after the identification of the initiatives that are already ongoing. That's why in June this year, during the Zero East Forum that happened in Istanbul, in Turkey, in a meeting of Marrakesh Partnership, the Istanbul platform was launched that has the goal of being the umbrella to connect these already existing initiatives, connect the institutions, and the solutions turned toward zero waste and circular economy, with the goal of delivering results for COP31. So through the identification of different initiatives and solutions that are already ongoing on each one of the axes of the action agenda, through the perception of the zero waste topic, circular economy topic, are transversal topics to all of these other axes in the transformation agenda. After we identify that these actions, these initiatives and solutions have this catalyzing power of accelerating the transition to a lower emission model that was chosen, this topic as one of priorities of COP, and we've been working through the teams, the climate champions teams. Dani's given all of the support with the COP30 team so that we can advance along these lines. So whether in the industry, civil construction, transportation, the food system, chemical industries, or critical minerals, the industries of the future must embrace this topic of zero waste and circular economy. This is a topic that has been gaining global importance with the leadership of the First Lady of Turkey, Mrs. Erdogan, that has since a long time has been bringing this topic to the international environment. In 2022, we had the approval of resolutions through the General Assembly of the UN on the topic of zero waste, and COP31 has been gaining this protagonism, has bringing this topic as a protagonist. So the invitation for Antalya is very simple. Let's move on with partnerships, projects, measurable impact, how it's creating employment, attracting investments, and improving the quality of life of people. The presidency of COP already announced some of the targets to guide the discussions for this year, accelerating the clean economy, increasing the electrification from 20% to 35% until 2035, reducing by half the solid residues and waste until 2035, and supporting the circular economy, increasing the global rate of using of materials up to 15% until 2035, the rate of circularity. So if we can align ambition with implementations, public policies with partnerships, and innovation with investments, the green industrialization that is so well seen by this topic this may become the motor of sustainable development for the next decades. Thank you.
Agradecemos ao Carlos Silva pelas palavras.
Thank you, Carlos Silva, for the words. And now we will hear high-level climate champion from COP30, Dan Yoshpi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be here in this first official day of São Paulo Climate Week, here at the home of the industry that I belong, and I always like to see my friends in this environment, and I'm very glad to see the presentation from Musa about this whole advancement in SB COP that is impressive, and that in fact, I believe started at the end of 2024, so it's still not been 2 years of the seed of this idea, and been a year and some months of this brilliant leadership. This idea is from the President Alban. It's very kind for Musa to say that it was part of the idea, but the idea came from President Alban, and after the SNI, he had this idea, and I just would like to make a parallel, because we're also here along with Bruna, that is the architect, in fact, of this agenda, reformed agenda, and the way of thinking climate action throughout the world, that these things match. Maybe if we didn't have this new way of dealing with the climate agenda, an organization such as SB COP maybe wouldn't have grown as fast and found such an interesting way ahead, because the ambition of the climate acceleration agenda, in the end of the day, its mission is to accelerate the implementation of solutions in the point of view of the speed of introduction, as well as the introduction of scale, gaining scale, which are determinant factors for us to see the sustainability, not only environmental sustainability, but also economical sustainability and all the other sustainability, so that these processes can move on and fulfill their roles, which are very clear in the Paris agreements, in the global stocktake, and in the brilliantism of this idea that came along with COP30 of searching the global stocktake, this whole agreement in which all the parties belonging to COP had reached in time, and seek for all the initiatives throughout the world that dealt with this topic and organize them and give them a continuous life, a systemic life through these famous 6 axes that created 30 activation groups that talked about that moment with the 30 key goals of COP30. And in the end, we're able to bring 482 initiatives throughout the world that from now on started to be in fact followed monthly and have huge visibility in a global portal of the UN called NASCA. And after that, they generated the 120 plans for solutions acceleration, which is the part that I really love, when we're reaching the end of the implementation of solutions, in which we're dealing with removing the obstacles. So all of these topics have obstacles of very different natures. We're maybe talking about funding, training of people that were dealt by Davi in the beginning, maybe talking about legislation throughout the world or in a specific country, technology, and the entity groups that congregate social groups, companies, whatever, the academy that has a profound knowledge of that topic is in the conditions of removing these obstacles throughout the time and accelerating the implementation of solutions in order to gain scale and have a certain of economic independence. And we have good examples. Solar energy, if we went back many years ago, we would be in a different stage. Wind energy as well, the electrifications of light vehicles as well. But we have several obstacles in other initiatives. We may be talking here about the aviation fuels, hard to abate, and other fuels. But when we're talking about climate change, we have an equivalent look towards the adaptation and how communities, the cities, the people will live with the climate change, which is amongst us. And even though our performance is good in finding a convergence for decarbonization, effective decarbonization, we will have many, many years of coexistence with the climate crisis. And unfortunately, before improving, possibly we will have a deterioration like we're seeing today in the European case, and we will see in several regions throughout the world, and even here, of course. So it's very important to see what is happening with SBCOP and what happens with the global climate action agenda in the sense that we may reach this goal. And here, of course, we leave COP30 with a number of world maps and definitions that are very important. But to the ends of climate agenda, which is the part that I'm more connected with, of course, there are very important topics. The first one is, in fact, the renewal of the huge acceptance of this agenda and this architecture, not only by the countries, but precisely by the partners. Here we have two questions. The countries had the first contact with this agenda in June of 2025 in Bonn, when Bruna and the champions teams and the UN could present this idea and this way of working. So it was well seen, and we could only introduce at that moment to the partnership of Marrakesh and many other entities that were there. But of course, we had to see what this would generate, in fact. And in the end of July, in fact, 2025, we started to roll out this architecture. So everything is very recent. We just completed 1 year of the launching of this architecture and this process. But when we reach Belém, we still have the 482 initiatives with 120 action plans for the acceleration of solutions advancing, which showed a huge addition. And when we leave Belém, the UN, the countries and the partners say, let's readequate the whole calendar, the whole agenda, the whole climate weeks and all the meetings regarding this topic connected to the six axes, as SBCOP did, with no hierarchical order from top down, merely the vision that in fact would accelerate the way we work. So this is very important, and it's a great legacy that Brazil leaves. Of course, throughout time, and Carlos brought this very well, the priorities might change. Musa also mentioned that, and this is how it should be. Brazil should be thinking, and thinking about Brazil and thinking about the world, brought 30 key goals. Of course, that throughout the cycles of the COPs, we need to update that and give chance to each geography, each regional leadership to bring their own more urgent needs to be put in this calendar, even though we may already have a twist of circularity. We're now having a huge momentum in this topic, which is really welcome. When we reach COP32 in Ethiopia, surely we will have other topics, for instance, the clean cooking, which is a core topic for resolution in Africa. And I hope that even though we may have dealt that with COP30 and COP31, we will have more emphasis into that, and that's how it should be. But as well as we can keep the continuity so that all the partners may work together in the acceleration of the solutions implementations, whatever COP happens, whatever the climate weeks may happen in a predictable way, the better. So we leave COP30 with a very uniform and positive view of this architecture, and not by chance the countries said at least in the next 5 years we should continue this process so that we may reach our goals. So we have an organization and invisibility that we didn't have before. What we expect in the case of SBCOP, that I'm sure is not casual, may occur in many other situations, and this is what we're seeing. We start to see better results, better productivity, better efficiency, and better assertiveness in what we do in this action. And the next chapters, I see that the countries see that this method, this architecture is being fruitful, and also decide in Belém to generate up to until Antalya a new mechanism, which is a global accelerator of implementation. So beyond the non-governmental parts, along with the governmental parts, leading this climate agenda, now we will have the COP countries also looking into these solutions, these acceleration plans, and giving better visibility, very much in line with what Musa just said, that SBCOP will do, the countries will also do. So between COP31 and COP32, we'll also have this accelerator of that moves into the direction of supporting speed and scalability. So once that's said, I believe we're in a good path, but of course the task is big. And finally, as we're here in São Paulo and in Brazil, I'd like to reiterate the need for us to also accelerate even more the way we work as Brazilians, the way we act as Brazilians, so that all this potential that we in fact have, that is unique, so that it may not stand in the way. And some of these solutions that are so important for Brazil, I could talk about SAF, the maritime fuel. I could talk about the areas that can be recovered, or even the agriculture. I could talk about mining, hydrogen. There are many, many topics, the biofuels. We need a very strong action as a country, as a society, so that we can change our socio-economical development pattern, so it's sustainable, so that we make good use of this opportunity that will not be repeated many times. We had a democratic bonus, we did a certain use of that. Now we have this sustainability bonus that reinforces my view that it's not a negative agenda, it's an extremely positive agenda, especially for countries such as Brazil. Let's see if we make good use of this agenda, and it will not last forever. We must remember that here we have two possible world outcomes. One that I don't believe with that everything will go wrong, and we delay the social economic development of the world for many decades. And I don't know how we would later deal with that. And the most probable one is that the world will find solutions as it's already showing in the climate agenda. That being, we will not be carbonizers or generators of this problem for many decades ahead. We will find the balance and the resolution. And when we reach there in the famous net zero, we will not have give as much value for other topics such as carbon of this topic. So it's very important for us to make good use of these few decades we have ahead of us so that we can motivate this so that we can reduce the gap for the most developed countries and so that we can make this agenda a positive agenda. So thank you very much, everybody. Congratulations to SPNI and to SBCOP. And I'm very glad to see this climate week here in São Paulo. And I'm very glad to see that it started such an interesting and positive way. Good afternoon, everyone.
Obrigado, Dan. Nós assistiremos a seguir ao vídeo do presidente da Federação das Indústrias do Estado de Rondônia,
of the president of the industries of Rondônia, also vice president of the CNI and vice council of SBCOP. Marcel Tamaia. Greetings all, it's a pleasure being here, talking to you, talking about the productive process in a way to be able to create more positive results. And a representative of the industry and part of SBCOP. This double responsibility translates the initiative, connecting the institutional force of national industry entities and cooperating and integration. CNI is not only the host of this forum, Confederation has a central role in building SBCOP and the effort of building an important industrial voice in climate issues. It's in a partnership with different business institutions that SBCOP really gained force during the COP30. Now we have the participation of more than 65 countries, and it reaches around 45 million companies. It shows the strength of industries and companies. We really understand the reality of productive entities and companies, and we are able to create collective agendas. The confederations, they provide the legitimacy and the ability of mobilization, and we intend to take these demands to decision spaces. At the same time, it is able to translate concrete pathways to the productive groups. That's why this is the backbone of SBCOP. As vice president of the SB Council, it's my role to make it concrete. SB Council should be a space of leadership or in building consensus between business companies and businesses. Our goal is not just contributing for the climate debate, it's to help the organization and implementation of the agenda. The mobilization built at COP30 is not finished at the end of a conference. It's a permanent process to follow the cycle of the COPs and implement throughout times. In COP31 in Antalya, we want to strengthen SB COP as a platform with legitimacy, but with responsibility as well. It's a platform that presents consistent proposals, mobilize business leaders, and accelerate scale solutions. I invite you all to be part of this construction. CNI will keep on organizing this initiative. Along with our SB COP partners, we will broaden the business participation and ensure that the productive voice is followed by concrete results. Thank you so much, and I wish you all a great meeting.
Agradecemos a todos que participaram desta sessão de abertura. Os convidamos a ocuparem lugares.
Thank you so much. So let's carry on with our schedule. So I ask you all here to go back to the audience. Now I invite you all to watch the CEO of Unilever, former CEO of Unilever, and ambassador of Unicop.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's a privilege to join you, even remotely, from CNI in São Paulo, at a moment when the private sector's role in climate delivery has never been more contested and never been more necessary. Let me be direct about the moment that we are in. Geopolitics is fractured. Some governments are stepping back, and capital is nervous. And in many boardrooms across the world, there is a question quietly being asked. Is this still the time to lead on climate, or is it the time to retreat? I want to answer that question in the next 10 minutes, not with hope, but with evidence, because I've lived this tension before, at scale, inside one of the largest consumer goods companies in the world, during a financial crisis, with activist investors knocking at the door. And what I learned then is more relevant to São Paulo today than it was to London in 2009. When I became the CEO of Unilever in January 2009, we were in the middle of the global financial crisis. The easy, safe, expected move would have been to hunker down, to cut costs, protect the dividend, manage quarter to quarter, and wait for the storm to pass. Well, we did exactly the opposite. Within months, we ended quarterly earnings guidance, a decision most of Wall Street told us was reckless at the time. We told investors we would run the business for the long term, and we would build Unilever around what we called the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, a single simple conviction that social and environmental performance and financial performance were not in tension. They were the same agenda, viewed at different time horizons. That wasn't philanthropy. It was capital allocation. We redirected R&D towards sustainable innovation. We rebuilt supply chains around smallholder farmers and fresh water stewardship, because volatility in cocoa or palm oil or tea was a balance sheet risk, not a value statement. We invested in brands with social purpose, Dove, Lifebuoy, Domestos, because purpose-driven brands were growing faster and commanding stronger margins than the rest of the portfolio. The results are a matter of record. Over that decade, Unilever delivered a total return to shareholders of roughly 300%, outperforming most of its peers and the market by far, whilst cutting our environmental footprint and touching more than 1 billion people through health and hygiene programs. We proved in a company with over 400 brands and operations in nearly every country on earth that sustainability was not a cost line. It was the growth strategy. And I say this not to relitigate history, but because the lesson is precisely what this forum needs to hear today. The argument that climate leadership requires business to sacrifice performance was wrong then, and the data says it's even more wrong now. For too long, climate action has been sold badly as a sacrifice. Less growth, higher cost, lower living standards. That framing is not just uninspiring. It is now factually backwards, and it is losing us the argument in exactly the countries and communities that this forum represents. So let me offer you a different frame. One I used everywhere I speak now, because the emerging markets in this room are living it in real time. Less sacrifice, more freedom, less dependence, more security, less decay, less delay, and more leadership. Every barrel of imported fossil fuel is a transfer of wealth and a transfer of vulnerability to price shocks, to supply chain disruptions, to currencies you don't control. However, every solar panel, every wind turbine, every domestic battery installed is by contrast energy independence you own. This is not an environmental argument. This is economic sovereignty argument. And it is one that every finance minister and every CFO in any emerging market should be making out loud. The cost curves have already been turned. Renewables are now cheaper source of new power generation in the majority of markets represented in this room. Delay is no longer the cautious option. It's the expensive one. Well, you've asked me to speak about climate finance. So let me be specific about where the private sector responsibility actually sits. Because it is not primarily in pledges. First, capital owners must align their money with their stated commitments. I have spent years watching institutional investors, family offices, pension funds sign climate commitments with one hand, whilst voting their shares against climate resolutions with the other. Proxy voting alignment is the single most underused instrument we have. If you manage capital and you have made a net zero commitment, your proxy votes are not a footnote. They are the commitment. Second, we need to solve for risk perception, not just risk reality in emerging markets. Capital is not staying away from Brazil or from Southeast Asia or from Sub-Saharan Africa because the underlying projects are bad investments. It is staying away because the risks is misperceived, undiversified and unblended. Blended finance, concessional capital from developing finance institutions, absorbing early stage risks so that private capital can flow at scale is not a nice to have. In many cases, it is the unlock. We have working models, microfinance institutions like Grameen and BRAC, mobile money infrastructure like M-Pesa, industrial players like CEMEX building affordable housing finance for the underserved. Well, these examples prove that underserved and uninvestable are not the same word. The private sector's responsibility is to bring that proof of concept to climate infrastructure, distributed energy, smallholder agriculture, climate adaptation at the scale that these problems demand. And third, insurance and supply chain exposure are becoming the sharpest business case for adaptation finance. Boards that would not act on a temperature chart will act on a reinsurance premium and a supply chain disruption. And that's the language that finance understands once more. And business leaders in this room should be using it internally for sure right now to unlock adaptation capital that pure climate advocacy has struggled to release. On jobs and skills, this is where I think business has been the most timid, and where the opportunities actually are the largest. The dominant narrative, particularly around the energy transition and now around AI, is one of job losses and disruption. It's incomplete and it's demotivating an entire generation of workers we need on our side. The evidence, once more, including recent global workforce research I've been reviewing, increasingly shows that the story is not simply sacrificing jobs for climate. It's opportunity versus sacrifice. An opportunity is winning in the data when leaders choose to frame it that way and invest in it accordingly. Every solar installer, every grid technician, every retrofitted building electrician, every climate smart economist is a job that did not exist a decade ago and cannot be offshored. Emerging markets have a demographic advantage that the developed world does not. A young workforce that can be trained directly into the green economy without first being trained out of the old one. That's a competitive advantage from Sao Paulo to Lagos to Jakarta. If the private sector treats skill investment as a core strategy, not corporate responsibility. The responsibility of business here is threefold. Fund the reskilling directly, partner with technical education systems rather than waiting for governments to build them alone, and critically publish the data on green job creation as rigorously as we publish quarterly earnings. So the opportunity story has the same evidence weight as the disruption story. Here is what I want you to leave with on the road from Sao Paulo to the COP31 in Antalya. The private sector's most important responsibility right now is not a new pledge. We have enough pledges. It is closing the gap between private conviction and public action. I've sat in enough boardrooms to know that most business leaders privately understand exactly what I've described tonight: the economics, the risks, the opportunities. Far fewer are willing to say so publicly, defend it against the short-term pressure, and vote their capital accordingly when it's uncomfortable. That gap between what leaders know and what leaders do is probably the single largest obstacle to translating ambition into delivery. Not technology, not even finance in the end. Courage. So my ask for every business leader watching this forum is very simple, and it is threefold. Align your capital with your commitments. Every proxy vote, every capital allocation decision. Not just sustainable reports. Tell the true story that climate action is freedom, security, and leadership, not sacrifice. Inside your organizations first, then to your investors, and then publicly. And show up when it's inconvenient. The leaders who mattered at Unilever weren't the ones who agreed with me in private. They were the ones who backed the strategy publicly when activist investors and analysts said that we were wrong. Geopolitics will remain uncertain. Governments will move at the pace that governments move. But the private sector does not need permission to lead. We have the balance sheet, the technology, and now unambiguously the evidence. We proved at Unilever that doing this business builds stronger companies, not weaker ones. The data since has only strengthened that case. The only question left for every leader in this network of 45 million companies is whether you will act or what you already know. I want to thank you, and I look forward to the discussions that follow. We have an opportunity to set the bar high here for the next COP. And thanks once more to Brazil for hosting this important forum. Thank you very much.
Muito bem, daremos então início ao primeiro painel desta tarde.
Move on to the first panel of this afternoon with the topic skills for the climate economy, preparing workers for the supply chain. Let's invite to the stage the Sustainability Director from Schneider Electric and moderator of this panel, Arthur Wong.
Convidamos a diretora
We would like to invite the programmer of this event, Thais Ferraz,
and
the specialist in policies and industry in the National Industries Center at Senai, Marcelo Pio.
Participam conosco de forma online.
Also, along with us online,
Jobs and Skills for the New
Economy, Ambassador from the Work Group for Jobs and Productive Inclusion of SBCOP, Dr. Lisbeth Sear, and also the Project Program Director Angela Pilat from PISE, and the Counselor of the International Organizations of Employers, IOA, Ulas Iris. Now we'll pass the floor to the moderator of this panel, Arthur Wong. Good afternoon, everyone. It's very good to see this room so filled in the beginning of this São Paulo Climate Week. Before we start, I'd like to invite Professor Elizabeth, that she has a presentation for us that will give the context for our discussions. Hi, Elizabeth, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Great.
Floor is yours. Welcome.
Try. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I will try and share my screen because I have a little presentation for this opening keynote. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Oh, hold on 1 second. Making it sure. Yes. Is it there?
Not yet.
Okay.
Eu acho que precisa trocar a fonte aqui da tela. Yes, now we can see it.
Perfect. And great, that's perfect. So what I will do is I will present some messages from the work that we have been doing with SBCOP, with the working group, as well as with the Jobs and Skills for the New Economy global initiative that was launched at COP30 and is also an initiative of the PAS. It's one of the PASs. It is a multi-country, multi-organization collaboration. So it has a lot of inputs from many organizations and partners who are in the room, including SBCOP. And I've been absolutely honored to be part of SBCOP and the leadership that CNI and also Ricardo have given to this initiative. So it is a great pleasure to be here and also to benefit from our chairmanship with Schneider Electric. So I will be presenting 3 messages and 3 actions, and I'll try to go through them quickly because you've been listening to a lot of people. The first message is that the new economy is a jobs economy. And this is the point that Paul Polman was making earlier, that actually the green economy could potentially create an additional 370 million net jobs globally. At the same time, we have to recognize that these jobs that there will be job losses and job gains in different sectors. And this is what this chart shows, is that in different sectors, we will have gains in the green and we will have losses in the orange. And that will create a lot of churn. So job gains and losses will differ according to sectors, to geographies, and also job quality will not necessarily be guaranteed. If we look at this for Brazil, again, this is a good news story because we see that if we look at the estimates of a baseline scenario, of the scenario including the AI transition and the scenario around the ecological transformation plan, this is a good news story. The ecological transformation could potentially create jobs that even might offset some of the losses due to AI. But the important message here is that in order for these jobs to be better jobs, we need to think about the type of economic activity and especially the economic complexity. Brazil at the moment has a relatively low economic complexity, but there is a lot of effort to try and increase that. And the ecological transition and the sectors and value chains related to the transition could really help do that. And that also gives us hope that those jobs will also be better jobs. So that's the first message, a good news story, but a story of churn and the need to think about the quality of jobs. The second message is one about, are we prepared as countries? And what we found in the analysis that we did is that no, many countries are actually not well prepared. Again, as Paul was saying earlier, we have not prioritized this issue in the transition. Here you see a chart that shows the job opportunity on the horizontal axis and the labor market vulnerabilities on the vertical axis. Moving to the right means you are a country that has a lot of opportunities in the green transition. Moving up means you are a country that has some vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. And so the further to the upper right quadrant that you go, the more risky it becomes, but also the more opportunity countries have, which need to be addressed. And why is it that countries are not prepared and there are risks? There are many reasons, and these are just some stats that we have put together, but broadly speaking, it has to do with a lack of planning, it has to do with coordination failures, it has to do with the fact that our education systems are not up to fit for purpose, and then finally, the fact that finance is not there at the moment. In particular, if you look at climate finance, the share is that goes to skills and jobs investments is pretty limited. If we look at what countries are currently spending on labor market, active labor market programs, what we see is that this is very low in low-income countries, it's moderately low in other countries, and in higher income countries, it's close to 1%, but it has been declining over the years. So we need to work harder at getting this percentage up. So let me turn to the third message, which also has the 3 actions. So we got a package here. The third message is that we need to take action on 3 fronts. One is we need to plan better, we need to deliver better, and we need to finance better. And I will quickly go through what that means. And this is also in the report that we launched last year, and maybe my colleague from GIZ will be able to speak to it as well. The first big action that's required is that we need to get better at anticipating these transition-related employment shifts and skills mismatches and mobilize policy responses at national and local levels. So that means getting jobs and skills into strategies, creating orchestration bodies, creating what we call place-based workforce transition packs that can bring multiple stakeholders who are currently working in isolation together, and also developing stronger workforce intelligence systems. We need to get better data that allows us to predict. And that is, we have examples around the world where this has worked well, but I would like to highlight actually Brazil here, because Brazil has significant open and real-time data on the workforce, which could form the backbone for a workforce intelligence system. An example here is this platform called Data Viva that has allowed us to do some pretty cool things. Let me show you this. We were able to look at the value chains within the ecological transformation plan and see where are the potential job opportunities and in which regions of Brazil are those taking place. We can also look at what the skills deficits are in those regions, and we can overlay those with each other. And then we can even look at what main qualifications are needed. And that kind of analysis has already been done in a number of value chains that are part of the ecological transformation plan. And so this gives a very good basis to start acting and investing in jobs and skills. So the second part is that the second area of action is that we need to deliver better. And this is really about the creation of a new generation of skills and workforce development programs. We have to get much more agile, modular, and inclusive when it comes to skilling programs. In addition to skills programs, smart accreditation and job matching platforms need to be built that can validate formal but also informal learning. and connect workers to employers and entrepreneurship opportunities. And then finally, we could build actual training consortia, and I will talk about that in a minute in the context of the federations that are part of the SBCOP. Again, Brazil actually is a pretty good example here and has something to show the world. Senai, obviously, I don't need to tell this audience what Senai is doing, but the whole Sistema S is actually an example to the rest of the world because it's been quite unique and progressive in terms of the innovative approaches that it deploys in terms of skills and workforce development, in terms of also supporting small business and entrepreneurship in addition to providing skills, financing through mandatory payroll contributions, and then informing all of that by data. And then finally, the final action that we have been working on with this group of players and countries is really this investment issue. And I won't repeat much of what Paul said earlier, but essentially the investments that are needed for the climate transition and the nature transition actually need to include finance for jobs and skills, and that has been missing. So we need to mobilize public finance and make sure that public finance treats jobs and skills as investments, not just expenditure. We have to incentivize businesses to get into the game as well and help co-finance or incentivize them to invest. Also, targeting the climate and MDB or multilateral development bank finance, which should include more of the jobs and skills investments, and then also potential mechanisms for households to come in. Again, we have examples around the world where this is already working. So I will close here by saying, okay, what can we do next? How can you engage? All of you there in Sao Paulo, I'm sorry not to be there, but if I were there in the room today, I would say, join us. Join us to, first of all, support the work of SBCOP, which is an incredible platform to make progress on this issue. And one of the things we are working on is to create a compact of confederations, of federations of industry and business associations to work together on this issue. And why? Because many of the federations are already running large-scale training systems, but the programming and the activities are somewhat isolated at the moment. And so what we would like to do is to bring different federations of different countries together to actually commit to this skills development, and also to have a peer learning platform and a collaborative platform to make progress in this area. And all of this is part of this larger global initiative that I was mentioning earlier, that is working on these three pillars that I was describing earlier of planning, delivery, and finance. And maybe my colleague from GIZ can say a little bit more on that. But I just wanted to say that this is an initiative that brings governments, funders, UN agencies, IFIs, and the private sector together. And this is where SBCOP can really play an enormous role. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. As always, very clear, very intriguing. Bom, trocar para português aqui.
Now switch to Portuguese. What we want to do with these data right now is to deepen how the skills agenda and green jobs agenda may stop being a support in conditions and become a core leverage for climate inclusion and productive inclusion. Just to give you some context, I was deputy chair of the Green Skills and Jobs last year, and we were able to follow this global group that's very diverse group in alignment with what were the problems and a consensus of what would be the priorities. So what Elizabeth said, funding and financing less than 1% of the total capital available for climate crisis goes to training. The second one is an urgent need need to how to prepare the current workforce, the formal and informal workforce that has a great impact on that, and how we use the confederations. And the last one is how to prepare the future generations. It's no use we use to prepare the current ones and stop bringing values for the future generation. And the most interesting one is we were able to evolve from green juice to fostering human social development. That when we were talking, we understood what was the problems and what were the priorities, but now it's the moment for implementation to cause the real impact, to be able to anticipate these needs that we have. But 2 points come with a certain importance: speed and scale. We do not have time to waste, and we cannot do it in a specific segment without a real larger impact. That's what we want to build with our guests. We want to bring speed and scale to our narrative. So I'll start with Marcelo from SNI, a great SNI, our great partner, and I'd like to start with the starting point of this agenda is to identify what kind of skills will be needed before this gap becomes a bottleneck. And the second one, what should be the role of the private sector in anticipating the demands through demands regarding the government and the institutions, teaching institutions, and how can this demand be sped up with concrete professionalization programs? Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for the invitation. And once again, I'd like to congratulate this kind of event that finally we're facing a problem that comes for a while, which is the gaps problem, the competency gap, the skills gap. And that started a while ago when we started talking about the 4.0 industry, and we didn't talk much about this issue of gaps. That it's not from an issue of today, but we're facing a new process of mismatching, which is the need to have green skills. Allow me to use this term, green skills, not only in the occupations, dedicated occupations, and understand that in occupations and roles connected to renewable energies, for instance, but green skills distributed throughout the industrial occupations.
No Senai é exatamente a necessidade dessas competências
estarem. This is the necessity of these competencies to be in diverse occupations, not only a group of specialized professionals in the green transition. So, in terms of competencies, we identify the decision-making based on data, competencies on knowledges linked to this technological transition process that the green transition brings us, and the use and ability to use concepts of green chemistry, for instance, and how it impacts the productive flow and the management of a circular economy practice process. It's a sum of the skills that we analyzed, and it's a sum of knowledges, abilities that we translate as skills. So this amount of skills, knowledges, and abilities they generate these skills. So you have several
algumas competências mais específicas,
transversal skills. You have some of them that are the implementation of good practices.
Verdes, vamos colocar isso aí bem
Green
genérico.
good practices, let's put it in a generical way, and also the adjustment of process you need to implement, but more than that, you need to adapt a process to a new reality, whether it's technological or management tools during this transition process when we talk about green transition. The role of private sector is a protagonist. This is a classic role, but we need to have more and more previous protagonism. It needs to anticipate this. This is the great challenge.
Não está sendo acompanhado por outras instituições.
Senai has been doing this for a while, but which is the use of the update of professional profiles in terms of the use of tools. So we need to anticipate this demand. We need to anticipate the process of evolution of the green transition, and within that you have technology, you have management tools, communication, and so on. When I talk about mega trends of green transition, there's a huge package in it, and we need to use that. And somehow we try to diminish this mismatch, the evolution process, and modernize, because modernizing is faster than preparing costs or the training process. That's why we need to anticipate, so that this gap between training, educating, and the technological evolution within the transition, the green transition process, it needs to be the smallest as possible. This gap needs to be the smallest as possible. Senai has this prospective model for more than 15 years. So regardless of the sector, Senai updates this every year for each sector, and the industry develops a prospective study, and we identify what are these professional profile changes, what each profession will need to perform in terms of skills, abilities, knowledges, and from then on we have this knowledge or training trail. So Senai updates this in this way, and all of this validated by companies, because that's something else that the private sector and companies need more and more, to have a protagonist role, which is being part of update systems of any kind of a training program. We see this at Senai, but unfortunately, I won't say it's isolated, but I don't know any other professional training institutions that invite companies every year to be part of their regular updating process. Then I reinforce that universities need to do this as well. A lot from new professionals that we identify and that theoretically companies will need are from higher education professionals. And what I like to bring is, do universities work from outwards inwards, from outside inwards, or do they involve the productive sector in this debate? I risk to say that very little universities do these. When we discuss the training, educational training of engineers and all its portfolio, and also the professional educational training institutions, I believe that they don't do this as well. So the productive sector needs to be more firm in its position. And this morning we were talking how the electrician changed, so it's not only tension, current, and power. Now they need to understand about data. How are they going to analyze this data in a more efficient way? Engineering, before it was performance and cost, now it's efficiency and total lifespan of the product. Finances, it's not only, well, now it's the cost of carbon. What's the climate risk that it brings? Even purchases. It's not only quality and cost. We need to understand about scope 3. How is my whole chain is involved this? Then we can talk about strategy. So I think it's what you said is very important and important. So I'll ask Angela. Angela, can you hear us? Angela from GIZ.
Yes, I can.
Hi. So welcome, and let's bring you into the conversation here as an international corporation perspective, okay? How can we balance the urgency of the climate transition with the time required to train and reskill workforce at scale? Which approaches can most effectively close this gap, particularly in emerging markets?
Thank you very much for the kind invitation to today's panel, and good afternoon to everyone in Sao Paulo. I'm joining you from GIZ in Germany. To directly, because the time is limited, go to the core of your question. I think the work of SB COP and obviously the Global Initiative on Jobs and Skills for the New Economy that Lisbeth has mentioned, they go back to the same core understanding that obviously the climate transition and workforce transition are not separate challenges. So I think we all understand in this room that the pace of decarbonization will increasingly depend on how quickly our societies can create systems that allow millions of people to learn while contributing productively. So I think going back also to what we've heard in the previous hour is investment in jobs and skills is not a cost of the transition. In fact, it's a precondition for delivering it, and it is a very smart choice for business. So what can we do to engage with this tension that you're speaking to in your questions? Whereas on the one hand, moving too quickly in the green transition without skilled workers can, of course, create safety risks, poor quality installations, project delays, higher cost, etc. While on the other hand, moving too slowly risks locking us in high emission infrastructures and missing climate targets. So in a nutshell, the most effective strategy is to make every climate investment also an investment in human capital. This way, infrastructure expansions, workforce development reinforce each other rather than compete for time. So speaking from GIZ's experience as implementing jobs and skills projects for decades in more than 40 partner countries worldwide through multi-stakeholder partnerships, I think there's 4 key lessons that help us to kind of reduce time and cost for workforce development, which is really what we need at this point in time. Number 1 is we need to train alongside deployment, not before. Rather than just delaying deployment until enough specialists exist, employers can and should build apprenticeship and earn while you learn models directly into projects. So think of it like every new offshore wind farm, heat pump installation program, etc. They become a training site themselves. Number 2 would be to prioritize transferable skills. And we've heard colleagues today speak about this already. Many workers already possess the skills that translate well into climate-related jobs. We know this. And this is really like the lever where we can reduce time and cost of workforce development. And 3, obviously, maybe that's obvious to many, but I think it's worth repeating. We need to focus on occupation, not just industries. So if you think of it, the transition is often described, obviously, moving workers from fossil fuels to renewables, but many occupations exist across sectors. So if you look at welders, project managers, engineers, logistics specialists, they all remain in demand regardless of the energy source. So training in that regard should emphasize new technical requirements while preserving existing professional expertise. And of course, and we heard this today as well, we need to align education with labor demand. So therefore, these multi-stakeholder partnerships are crucial to yield results. Governments, employers, unions, educational institutions, they all need to share forecasts of future workforce needs in order to act effectively. And then your question also spoke, obviously, what does this mean for emerging markets? Now, emerging markets face a distinctive challenge. Obviously, they often have the greatest potential for clean energy growth, but also the largest constraints in terms of education systems, financing, and institutional capacity. So what should they really do with regard to the 4 lessons that I've shared previously? I think one is clear, they also need to build training around real projects. So obviously training is most effective when it's tied directly to infrastructure investments rather than delivered in isolation. And that is really also what we're trying to do in our in-country work with the global initiative, and where GIZ is also supporting the work on jobs and skills for SB COP, really bringing that ambition to implementation. So if a country, for example, is expanding in solar capacity or modernizing its grid, electrifying transport, you name it, it's really the idea that when you partner together with companies and vocational training schools, local employers can really train workers on active sites. And by doing that, you actually not only create job-ready graduates, but you also create immediate employment pathways, which then reduces this mismatch between training and labor demand. And I think it's also crucial to keep in mind that many climate jobs do not require 4-year university degrees. They require practical competencies in fields such electrical installation, equipment maintenance, construction, industrial automation, etc. So therefore, we should invest in technical and vocational education and strengthen technical colleges, vocational institutes, etc. And that will actually also help us to deliver results faster than expanding traditional higher education alone. And I think, let me close by maybe talking a bit more about the 3 key enablers that Lisbeth also touched upon with regards to what we need to do more. So obviously, across emerging markets, if you look at it, there's always 3 factors that consistently show up as the biggest enablers. That is 1, public-private partnerships that I mentioned, so aligning training with actual jobs and technologies, but also stable climate and industrial policy that gives employers confidence to invest in workforce development, and then that very, very crucial element of access to finance to enable both companies and workers to invest in these new skills and that equipment. And I think if you look at this coherently, and we are at a really good path to kind of create and look at that tension and diffuse it and yield much more efficient results. So therefore, I can only repeat what Lisbeth has already shared, like join us in the work of the SB COP on jobs and skills and the global initiative. The more the merrier. We need everybody, I think, underlining that business case for investment in jobs and skills is crucial. And the stronger our collective voice is for making this business case, the more important results we can yield in a short time frame. And that's why we're here. And this is the most important step we can also take for more ambitious climate targets in a shorter time frame. So thank you very much for your kind attention. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the panel.
Thank you very much, Angela. I really liked, I think the more the merrier. So join us in this working group. I really like the word you put, preconditions. Investment in training is a precondition for your success. Also, the whole idea of anticipating new technology and piloting also those skills and how to do it in scale. But we also discussed a little bit about the issue with demographics, right? An older group of, workforce. And we're discussing a lot internally also mentorship, how important mentorship is now to really qualify younger people that we also discussed. It's harder to bring into the workforce with this different mindset. So very rich, thank you. Agora vamos para a Thaís, do Instituto Clima e Sociedade.
Now we'll talk to Thais from Institute Climate and Society, an issue that is really important to deal with the largest amount of people. So I'd like to talk about scale in terms of inclusion and skills. How can we close the gap of competences and inclusion and what kind of roles the civil society and climate philanthropy can design to form coalitions and broaden successful initiatives? Good afternoon. For too long in climate agendas, we've had a focus on transition, on decisions. Now we're focusing on the implementation. The green job agenda, it comes with a lot of solidness in these challenges. We're talking about the just transition, but we only have just transition if we create opportunities for several sectors and territories, and that's what we're talking about here. And starting from the big data, what we saw in Lisbeth's presentation, we see that Brazil has the potential of generating jobs such as for a transition to a low carbon economy. The big issue is if we don't have if we don't have a more detailed gaze upon it, we will see difference between different sectors. We know that some sectors will be reduced and others sectors that are totally new or others that need to be totally adapted. So we've been working at ICS in this perspective to promote knowledge on where are data, what are the skills necessary that need to be developed, and we work a lot with Senai, and also looking at some regions that have some sectors that will be reduced, and where do these economical opportunities will appear. I'll talk about a few examples on what I'm talking about. We've been working with a strategy that is our power shoring strategy, that is a concept on how we use the energy transition potential. That means all the renewable energy that Brazil has, it's generated in the northeastern region, but it's a region that do not use this energy to develop its socio-economical development potential. So in the power shoring strategy, we see industries that can use this clean available energy so that they can insert their plants in the northeastern region so we can develop the local development. What's being done together with several partners. ICS works with several partners from the universities and private sectors and civil society. Is understanding what are the professionals that need to be ready, what are the necessary skills to implement this power shoring in the region. An example of industry that can be used is the fertilizer industry. We know that Brazil is a huge fertilizer importer, and with the closing of the Hormuz Strait, the prices have risen so much, and we're discussing, and this could be done, for instance, in the northeastern region, using what they have in terms of infrastructure. And from then on, what are the necessary skills to be developed? And it's an agenda that needs to be thought from now on, because it takes a while so that this happens. And this is a strategy that we see, and it generates opportunity, and it keeps and creates a model of local development from renewable energies.
Brazil has already done that. We have an extremely renewable matrix. It's an advantage regarding to other countries, and we can use that much better than we've been using lately. And there are some sectors that are completely new, such as forest restoration. Brazil has very ambitious targets according to our policy from Planavac. We have a targets to recover 12 million hectares, 20 million of degraded pastures, and great potentials for regenerative agriculture. And what are the new jobs that can be generated with that? The studies from the forest restoration area point between 1 and 1.2 million jobs that might be generated to work in this sector, which is a sector relatively new in the country, at least on this scale that we have committed in these global commitments. And at last, and finally, there's this transition process. So we also be working in Rio Grande do Sul region, in which we still have generation of energy through coal, something that is being disincentivated throughout the world. We have an agreement to do a phase out. So how do we see and assess what are other economic alternatives to absorb the workers that are now employed by this industry, but that really need to be relocated? And with that, we really give a concrete aspect to it, and we can deal with the climate agenda and transition agenda, work it more pragmatically and more aligned with the socio-economic development agenda. Very good. I really like this fair transition, that aligning opportunities and knowledge in this opportunity here for us to use the local.
Now we're going to talk to Ulas.
Now I'll talk to Ulas. Ulas, can you hear us?
From IOE, a big partner of ours in the working group of the Green Skills, present in all the meetings. So thank you for being here. Let's kind of look ahead to COP31. What kind of governance and coordination among companies, employers, organizations, governments, and training institutions is needed for jobs and skills agenda to advance constantly? And where should the private sector lead? And where is its strong public sector coordination essential? So joining the two sides of the coin.
Okay then. First of all, I am grateful for this chance to speak at this high-level event, and I'm honored to be here. I will be brief. As you can understand from the program, there is too much knowledge here, and I got, I think, 3 or 4 pages of notes, and that's great. This is enormous level of knowledge, and this is great to have. First of all, let me begin by introducing IOE to you. International Organization of Employers is a 100-year-old organization within the international business dependency and also advocacy, and it is represented in nearly 150 countries with distinguished employer organizations, just like CNI, which is, I think, one of the pioneers in climate change issues, and also for the COP, their dominance and their leadership is beyond appreciation. And this is great to have them at this event, also in the organization part. And also CNI is demonstrating how employer organizations can help bridge policy discussions with the practical delivery side, which is right now everybody is talking about the implementation. As I am coming from Turkey, I'm also one of the representatives of the host country within this panel, and this is also my honor to be here about this. As we look toward the COP31, there is a need for implementation. Everybody is talking about the implementation. For the skill side, we just underlined there's a lack of best practices within the organizations. And for the international side, I just want to underline the critical parts with regard to the policy coherence, and also there is the important place for private sector lead within these discussions. And that's why I have been referring to our latest report, which is dated to 2024, which is prepared for the COP29. It is reflecting some countries from Caribbean, as Asia and Pacific, and also Middle East. And these examples are showing us that what is needed for the policy coherence within the international platforms. And I just want to underline four messages, and this is as we have all these debates with our distinguished speakers here, it is evident, and I will be repeating their comments for this. But first issue I just want to underline is we need permanent mechanisms for skills anticipation and workforce planning. As Lisbeth from the beginning, she underlined and she emphasized the importance of planning. And at the planning side, there is a gap of effective systems to identify future skills needs. As my colleagues from Brazil, Marcelo and Thais, has rightly said, Brazil is, I think, one of the most advantageous countries in the global arena, because they have all the, we may say, systematic data and all the projections for future skills. And this is, I think, from my point of view, from also IOE's point of view, it is great to have. In our report, we have some cases from Nigeria and South Africa with regard to the planning side. And especially for the Nigeria, they have an energy transition plan. And in this plan, there is a recognition of a need for partnerships between businesses and research institutions in order to deliver results with data, which is in most of the globe, there is a lack of data. And that's why I have been underlying the case of Brazil from this point of view. My second point I just want to raise is the private sector's role is very critical, and it needs to be in the leading position. As CNI, which is our partner organization, our members, our precious members, is defining skills demand and creating training options and opportunities. Private sector lead is very critical, and that's why we have in the report New Zealand and Egypt cases. These are really outstanding cases. With regard to the New Zealand, there's an energy academy within the business NZ Business New Zealand organization, our member, and they have gathered industry, government, civil society, academicians, educational providers in an entity, and they just map a future workforce needs analysis. And this is really critical for making this kind of analysis based on the leadership of business entities, private sector. Thirdly, my third message will be for a stronger private-public coordination. We need more understanding from the side of public institutions. Especially within the skills arena, there are too many players within the government sides, within the public institutions. Especially in case of Turkey, I can offer you Labor Ministry and environmental institutions. Environment Ministry has some issues with regard to the preparation of future skills need. And this is the case in most of the emerging countries, and also especially we don't have the lack of the TVET or vocational education institutions within the emerging countries. This is also a gap for making this kind of public-private partnership. The fourth point I just want to underline is we need public and private partnership, but we need more institutions beyond this. Just like the universities, just like the academic institutions, just like development banks, there are too many aspects which needs to be addressed in this issue. As Lisbeth has stressed before, finance is very critical, and financial institutions, also data is very critical. Statistical institutions within the countries must be included in the decision-making process with their reliable and up-to-date data. And that's why this kind of new players is needed within the discussion of skills set, upskilling or skills agenda. For the COP31, lastly, I just want to underline that we need to move to the measurable implementation. Otherwise, we can talk about again and again with the implementation, but it needs to be measurable. Otherwise, it will be abstract, and we don't get any concrete result from this debate. And also, we need to embed the skills considerations in all climate and development policies in order to make it more visible, especially as I'm also referring to Lisbeth's presentation once again. If we analyze the NDCs, National National Determination issue, as it is evident, 80% of this NDCs doesn't cover anything with regard to the skills agenda. And this is, at this stage, it is a very big gap for businesses and also for the workers, for the enterprises, for the employers. This is a huge gap also for us. Thirdly, I just want to underline that the formal governance mechanism is needed, but also they need to deliver results, as in what's the organization in Brazil, as in Senai, the Marcelo's organization. We need such kind of very concrete programs, concrete issues, which needs to be dealt with all the parties within the organizations, within the countries. And that's why this kind of coherence must be reflected to the international level. We need such kind of international collaboration, cooperation tools in order to make it more visible. Lastly, I just want to underline that we will prepare a new report for the case studies this year for green skills. It will be launched with the Antalya event, COP31, and I will be really thrilled to share it with you in this occasion. Once again, I am grateful for this chance, and I wish all the luck, I wish all the success for Sao Paulo Climate Week. And once again, thank you.
No, thank you. Hope to see you soon in Turkey.
I hope so.
I think it's very clear that, again, for a better planning, a better delivery, you need the data and the coordination. I think that's clear. Everybody said this a little bit. If you want to have quicker results and in a larger scale. Bom, a gente chegou agora no momento.
Well, we've reached the moment. I believe we have less than 10 minutes, so we can open for questions. If anyone has any questions to my colleagues, well, maybe we muster courage after lunch. So let me ask you a question that goes along with the coordination that we're talking about. What stops these signs from the companies reach the necessary institutions? What do we lack? What do we need? Is it coordination? Is it more effort, more engagement, replicating, thinking collectively? What do you think is missing? Can you help us? Of course. Well, I believe it's approximation. When we're talking about innovation ecosystem, we're talking about three actors. We're talking about state, people, and the academia. They are still disarticulated. Regarding professional training does not differ. So we need this articulation. First, we need this protagonism from the private sector to participate more effectively in this process of creating this system. Senai's case is atypical because Senai is from the industry sector. So it's almost like our obligation to listen to the companies because so that the companies may participate in this process. But still, it started only 20 years ago. I entered through the system, through the classroom. In Rio, I was a professor of a textile chemistry school, and back then, the training came from inside out. And after a while, Senai is an example, only an example. They created their technical committees that companies participate in. So we need this approximation. The other federal institutions from the state, for instance, could do that, create their own committees, invite the companies, and make so that the companies may participate in the creation of this system. Universities, of course, as well. And in the case of universities, more specifically, it's important for them to work to train people for the workforce. And the gap in higher education is very high, very large. So we need, first of all, this entrepreneurial movement that is more active. It's not that it's not active, but be more active. And on the part of educational system, accept that. Because other than Senai, we see resistance. You see a resistance of interferences, so to say, of course, external interferences, so to say, to their training system. Our educational system is highly conservative. Professors are, personally speaking, are very conservative regarding changes. We have difficulties with change, regarding change. So it's forcing at the first moment this approximation.
Eu acho que tem também uma questão de timing, né? Porque, enfim, até você conseguir adaptar sistema educacional.
There's an issue in terms of timing.
Isso exige planejamento,
So it demands planning and a dialogue that it's not short term. So it needs to happen constantly so that future needs can be identified and there's planning. But there are interesting cases that we see when we collaborate with some states in which you have this guidance of companies that can define some technical workshops and courses. We're not talking about additional investments. It's an educational structure that already exists, but many times it's unaligned from the needs and what's exists that has been created by the work market. There's another issue that we need to remember, which is the situation of education in Brazil. So we need a gaze of, so that we can have basic indexes so that we can develop these new necessary skills for transition. Just a small complement. Implementation, we need to be less reactive. We hope that the company complains to act. So the use of anticipation models is important. You talked about timing, which is important. When you implement or update based on this anticipatory model, you start to train now, educate now to avoid the gap up ahead on the road. So when it becomes in statistics, it's already too late. You start with the complaints, short-term complaints and needs. So That's why I think it's really urgent.
Transição verde, mas isso é para
We're talking about green transition, but it serves for technological transition, demographic,
cada vez mais utilizar
and we need to use more and more anticipatory systems as inputs for the decision-making process.
Essa decisão fazendo planejamento de longo
making this decision with the long-term planning, using these anticipation models. You cannot think of a profile that at every technological or organizational change, we need to requalify those workers, those formal or informal student and workers. They need to be following the productive process and not stopping at every new evolution. We need to have a long-term, clear view, but you need to have people ready to multiply. Ulas raised.
Thank you, Max. I just want to underline 2 points with regard to this, because whenever we had this kind of organizations in order to make more consultation, there's a need for institutionalized structures. If there is an ambiguity in the establishment, there's no continuity and nobody cares about the outcome or result. There has to be, as in Senai's case, they have a legislation, as far as I know. They have a special law establishing Senai's structure related to the industry, and that's why there's a need for structured consultative mechanisms in order to make it more sustainable and more visible. Secondly, I just want to underline there is a need for inclusion of SMEs, because we are representing, in most cases, larger companies, bigger enterprises, and there is a need for the voice of SMEs and underrepresented workplaces, and that's why it needs to be addressed at the establishment of these consultative mechanisms. That's the 2 points I just want to raise. Thank you for this.
No, perfect. Thank you. Temos alguma pergunta?
Any other question?
Tentar atender as duas rapidinho.
Let's try to address both questions quickly. I'd like you to say something about a strong reality in Brazil from the point of the industry where linked to Europe and USA. I'm part of automotive sector, and the necessary training that I've been researching in companies that are established in Brazil, they don't reach the level that we would like, because of the research centers are there, the headquarters are there. So how do you intend to approach this? Do you have an idea on that? Could you the next question, and then we can answer both. Good afternoon. We are talking about present opportunities. If I had to invest in basic education, high school, and professionalizing courses, or university, or even masters and postgraduate, where would it be more effective based on the studies that you have done? I think we can answer this.
Bom, acho que a gente tem assim algumas questões, né, sobre
We have some
educação.
issues in terms of education.
Existem os skills mais técnicos,
we have more technical skills, but we have the educational basis, and as I said, Brazil has some mission of reaching the numbers of basic education, but we see other countries with a similar economical profile that manage to do this. So the issue is innovating and having a good distribution. And in terms of training new engineers, I believe in dialogue and the joint planning and having an excellence center in Brazil, promoting more industrialization in Brazil, bring excellence technology and not maintaining that economical profile that we saw that it's less complex. So it's increasing the risk of complexity in economy creates also an increase of complexity in the job creation. So that it's important that we don't have these problems.
A questão do gap, digamos assim, de demanda ou de exigência.
Trying to answer about the gap of demands between multinational company or transocean companies or something like that. I wouldn't be concerned with the big companies because they follow the direction of the headquarters, and it's not necessarily this. We know that we have educational problems, but it's not necessarily the lack of talents or the few talents that we have here. It's an issue of strategy. I would focus more in the middle and small team. These need a critical mass, but mainly a technical profile. So these companies are not attracting these talents for several reasons. We have a generational issue. And we talk about this lack of workforce, not only specific ones. And we have two problems. We cannot attract the young people to the industry, and it's a debate that is not something new. But I believe, in my point of view, we don't communicate very well. And that's my personal perception as a researcher in this field. We're not attracting the Gen Z only by financial issues. We will do this showing the potential of industry and using new technologies and establishing new challenges for this generation. This generation is not like the ones, like our generation that was working class, working generation that were working for salaries. In mechanics, for instance, they have a different way. It's not that idea of the cold train mechanist.
Mas focar fundamentalmente.
And we need to attract these talents, focusing in this evolution process. We cannot think that our evolution process will happen such as the developed countries. That's why it's important to analyze this professional service. Seeing the process of the territory, whether it's Brazil or a certain state.
Porque senão eu vou formar alguém muito qualificado e as empresas vão continuar não absorvendo. Só que eu gastei muito dinheiro para formar.
Will they overqualify someone and he won't be hired because there's no need for that profile. We need to serve the industry, but we cannot have this mismatch, whether upwards or downwards. We have to think about the small companies, which is about 80% of the Brazilian industry. The other issue is where to invest.
E quando você olha o futuro de todos os setores industriais, são muito desafiantes.
And when you look at all the industrial sectors, even those traditional ones like textile, civil construction, they have the potential of using very complex technologies that would generate interesting issues. But I would look at what I understand as enabling technologies, which is the huge dimension of chemistry that involves new materials and areas and themes that are at a fast evolution process. And I also think of development trail. We have two huge vectors, which are communication, information, and education. We have robotics and connection systems. And all the chemistry field of new materials, green chemistry, with all its potentials, professions and occupations within all these areas. But I'm not going to risk saying what occupations because I would be foreseeing future. So we were talking about basic education. We did a partnership with the Ayrton Senna Institute last year. The basic education, 85% is in the public schools. From that, from age 10, 6 graduate, 4 do not graduate. From the 6, 3 have an understanding of a text when they graduate. They can understand and make a judgment. Less than one can do an average mathematical calculation, and we want doctors, we want chemists, we want mathematicians, and we have this gap that is really key to look try to change. I agree with these technical lines, but what we hear in terms of artificial intelligence, who's going to use it better? So we need judgment with this critical sense and taste, and that means cultural baggage, understanding if that's good or bad. And these two factors are important. They're not easy. I don't have the solution for this, but if we don't think that these are critical issues, we are not going to be able to close this gap. And the question that you did, I believe that there are industries that we cannot compete. Others, such as bioenergy, of Patricia Ellen knows very well. These are, we are ahead. So we have the first harvest in the year with corn to make ethanol that we could develop. And that's what we can take to the world. I'm not going to compete in AI or in some other robotic industry that's where there are others so much ahead. But when you talk about data center, the first level is energy. Who has efficient energy in the world? Until we can take data centers to space, that's going to take quite a while, but we should focus and stimulate this. When I talk about scale, we think about small and medium companies, because the big ones will be able to develop new entrepreneurs with Sebrae and other projects such as this. I think this is what we can do to be competitive in the market. So I'd like to highlight that we have 3 pillars: green skills, the education and scales, working with the small and medium companies, and also the partnership with government and partner with companies to do that as well. We believe that education is a social issue, but it's clear that it's competitive as well. Without prepared professionals, without groups that have been doing a beautiful work, but without this change, it will be very hard to compete. So I hope this information is productive and inspiring so that we can achieve and conquer this climate agenda, and that we can work with it in our industry. And we'll be available here for a quick conversation. Thank you so much.
Agradecemos aos nossos palestrantes e também ao moderador desse painel, Arthur Wong.
Thank you for our speakers and moderator of our panel, Arthur Wong. Then we'll pass on to our second panel that deals with the climate funding and investment, mobilizing capital for a competitive transition in emergent markets. We'd like to invite Luciana Ribeiro, the founder and CEO of Flying Rivers.
A diretora de sustentabilidade da Confederação
The Director of Sustainability of the National Federation of Life, CNSEG, Cláudia Prates. Also would like to invite the operation officer for IFC, Diogo Bardal. And to moderate this panel, we invite the president of Systemic Latam, Patricia Allen.
Patrícia, é com você.
Patricia, you have the floor.
Boa tarde. Eu mantenho português ou mudo para inglês aqui? Português? Tá bom, porque eu recebi todas as notas aqui em inglês. Falei, gente, será que vai ser em inglês? É bom que eu vou traduzir em tempo real aqui, então.
I got all the notes here.
Bom, mas de qualquer forma,
Well,
Luciano,
anyway,
Cláudia,
so,
dispensa apresentações. Respeitando o tempo de vocês aqui, a gente
respecting your time here, we will adjust the panel a little bit. We're a little bit behind. We will go until 4:40 p.m. You know you will have schedule. I'll tell you that we will finish, and I'll have this difficult task to control the time here for you and with the audience as well. Those who have questions, please think of it right now so that we can take this opportunity to be able to learn from you and know a little bit about the current movement in all the topics regarding financing in such an important area. This panel, I could start it with an observation on the role of the emerging markets. I went into a different panel with Luciana opening this Climate Week in São Paulo, and she put an important point, which is how we need to adjust a little bit our discourse, what we're saying, because one of the critical points of the work here is to create financing mechanisms. Before we talked about blended finance, but it's not only that, we need co-investments, and these co-investments, we need the allocation of private capital, national capital, but also international capital. And the international scenario changed a lot in the last years in the geopolitical context. And we're talking about, in the case of emerging markets and Brazil specifically, of opportunities for investment, future investment. And in the case of CNI here, it's very important. The reindustrialization of the Brazilian economy, we went through a decade discussing how we were discussing the industry, and we have a unique opportunity to grow again this GDP. We saw last year that it's possible to double the GDP, increasing the participation of industry in the value chains of more added value, and increasing the income. And in this mapping that we've done here, all of them in the sector, we saw a very big opportunity in energetic transition, bioeconomy, infrastructure, adaptation, and resilience to climate change that Claudia is bravely leading. We saw the whole debate about insurance internationally, and there are many opportunities, of course, but we also have the need to do three things. First of all, we understand that the cost of the capital is very high. The risks, especially the perception of risk, is still very high. And we have very significant challenges to transform these projects and ideas into projects that are ready to receive investments. We even saw something that has been happening a lot. This pre-operational part of the projects have increasingly increased. Before we had an operational part of 1 to 2 years, and now we see projects that have a pre-operational phase that takes 3 to 4 years, because these are new value chains, new technologies, a very large scale. We even have been using a phrase, quote, saying that the size of investment for private equity with a risk of VC, so venture capital. So Luciana says, I need you to please to ensure that these projects go after this pre-operational phase so that I can invest on it. With that, I will start this discussion with you, covering some of these elements. I'll start a little bit with you, Diogo. We have this perception, this recurring perception, I'd say, that there is capital, that there is investment globally available for these projects that we're talking about here. Meanwhile, as I said, the projects in the end, the entrepreneur says, the resource is not reaching my company. So what is the problem? Is it scale? Is it the quality of the projects? What is avoiding this capital to reach the end point, in fact, with scale and speed that it needs, and especially in projects such as infrastructure, industry, bioeconomy, and mainly for countries such as Brazil? You have 5 minutes each one. Thank you, Patricia. You mentioned a key point in your introduction that I've been observing as well in our investment team from FC. I've been there for 10 years. I've participated in many investments committee. And what happens is that many projects, especially the most innovative ones, the ones that have a need for some kind of de-risking mechanisms, a different position than a senior positions, a traditional debt, they still need to have a multilateral work in its structuring to make it more bankable, to reduce a little bit the uncertainties in the cash flow of the project. And to me, so seen from within depends on the point of view. If you see from the point of view of the entrepreneur, you see that the problem is that the banks, investments, the development banks do not have the adequate risk appetite, and I kind of agree, because in the last years we've been taking into a little bit more risk, but that came when we also decided to get involved in some project in a previous phase. So we structure a new area called upstream in FC that we call it that way, and these are investment officials that are discussing bankability as aspects with the sponsors of the project before they go to the market, before they emit debentures, and they start discussing there the possibility to anchor debenture, to ask what kind of structure would be more adequate to find the foreign investors. So to me, this is one point. It's a very important point. This need to get involved prior, before. In my experience, I see that it works. Another point is that in the level of decarbonization of bioeconomy, that usually you finance, in the case of bioeconomy, a cooperative or a set of cooperatives, you have a problem of scale. And the Brazilian market in the last 5 years got sophisticated using securitization. So increases the FDICs, which are ways for you to diversify the risk of smaller projects and be able to make them, turn them into the structure that you need. For instance, in the FDIC structure, you can find the trustees that will be subordinate. You can balance the risk of that portfolio in a way that you will like more mobilization of private capital. So these 2 points are very important to me. I would still place a third one in the case of IFC, which is to find an environment of environmental risks, the social environmental risks that are manageable. So in all of these years, sometimes due to credit, the project doesn't die, but as a reputational, because of reputation or relationship with communities and negative news regarding to the partners, the project dies. So to me, this is this is a great learning. In order to attract certain kinds of institutional investors, this must be very well solved. The good news is that Brazil is really well established in this path. Brazil has very sophisticated sponsors, has technical people to do the structuring part. And now I see that we are in a phase of doing concept tests, doing more proof of concept in the first and second investments. For instance, in insurance, you have the insurance ladders. You release one, then another. You start to normalize this product in the market, and more turning into more sophisticated for paramedic insurance, for instance. So you test more and more, and this strengthens the capital, the attraction of capital for investors. Thank you very much, Diogo. So another element of complexity, this whole issue of governance and reputation as well. Now bringing to you, Luciana, as an investor as well, you also brought this point of adjusting to the international reality. How do you see in terms of costs and availability of climate funding? How do you see those 2 points affect competitivity of emerging markets companies regarding to well-developed markets? And what changes in practice an opportunity to transform a good climate opportunity, a good challenge, a good problem to solve into a clear, attractive, and adapted project? Great, Patty. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We today live a reality, as you mentioned at the beginning of your speech, of very high interest rates. The cost of the capital is very high, and that makes it difficult the lives of companies, not only those that have topics relating to climate. We've been living a very complicated moment, and also a scarcity of public investment. So when we see the need for investments here in Brazil, we imagine that these investments, part of it will come from national capital and partly coming from abroad. The national capital is very scarce due to the current conditions. So today we have a difficulty in this environment that is very relevant. So when we look at the abroad capital from abroad, there are 2 sides here. And I was talking about that earlier this morning. On the point of view of Brazil, we've done our homework to attract investments, a lot of our homework. Claudia already heard me speaking, and particularly I praise in your former home, BNDES, the National Development Bank for Brazil, had its role to increase the climate fund, to do a call last year with results this year. There's a whole work of the Treasury with involvement of the BNDES, Brazilian Development Bank, so that we can have several rounds of investments actively participating. We brought some solutions to what the market needed in point of view of hedge. Now we're talking about research and development. So we've had a number of important attributes that were necessary, and Brazil did their homework. I would also add that Brazil in the last years examined the sustainability as a development pillar and also did a lot of regulation shifts. We have regulated the carbon market, we have futures fuel law. So that means that Brazil understands the climate. So very positive things, not only to attract debt, as we say, on the part of the credit, but also equity, for sure. I believe we're still facing two difficulties, maybe three. First difficulty, to spread the message, because we are very aware of what we've done, but we are not necessarily in the global agenda. So when I'm abroad and I mention everything that we've done, the other side is surprised. It's good that we're telling them about that, but it's bad that our message was not 100% absorbed, and it's not because of lack of effort. Even the government, we're promoting many road shows and so on, but we still need to spread this message, which is very good. And a second topic that we face today is the global competition for attention, different than what it was some years ago when we had a very similar talk in different countries. When Brazil was the host of the G20, the global conversation was very much in the same direction. There was a very uniform view of need to reduce the greenhouse gases, that the new economy would be a decarbonized economy, and we could diverge regarding the adequate tactics to reach the goals, but there was a convergence in visions. Today, there are no convergences. The talks are very different. The discussions in the US is only about AI and the lack of energy to ensure AI to reach what it needs to reach. The conversation in Europe is a conversation. On one side, there's a climate, of course, concern. Now we have fire seasons, a very difficult periods right now, but it's a conversation about sovereignty, a very strong concern of how the European countries would leave their dependencies that went through Russia, the US, China, to be able to have more sovereignty, and how to bring partners into that. And this competes with the decarbonization conversation. So how can we turn into a better conversations? And the Middle East countries that were also connected to the decarbonization talks. If you look at COP28, when we launched the Alter Fund, $30 million placed into decarbonization thesis, and now the Middle Eastern theme is completely different. How would solve the war against Iran and leave this problem with the Strait of Hormuz? So conversations changed a lot. So we need to bring. There's no use to talking to people who have other things in their mind. It's more mercantile and bilateral issues right now. So topics that Brazil needs to bring forward if we want to attract international capital. It's a conversation that somehow will meet this need for in this worldview. And another thing that we need to overcome, and Diogo was talking about that, and I agree with that, is this issue of how the manufacturer bankability. We had a discussion. Do we need projects? Do we need capital? Oh, there's no bankability for the project. I don't think it's a very good term to translate in the part, so we use bankability. So it's a manufacturer bankability. What do I mean by manufacturer bankability? Many of the projects do not have off-taker, or they have a dependency on commodity that makes the volatility of this commodity to investors, or the number of the check faces that it's a check of infrastructure with a banking capital risk. So how do you create this bridge to solve this problem, and it's not unsolvable, but it demands time and it demands articulation. I believe today, when we go into this climate/impact topic, the biggest pieces that we have right now are the issues of systemic investment and capital orchestration. And even though those words are very generic, they talk a lot about what we need to solve here. When we look at the manufacturing capability, usually the problem is precisely because the value chain is not ready. You're accelerating. I agree with your question. The value chains are going through transformations, so you don't have all the developments. And we need these layers. That's why we need a systemic. What I see here, and I talked about many products, and I want to leave with a positive tone. I see a movement so that opportunities can be more and more concrete. We've been following along this direction to focus on things that with some articulation we'll be able to implement. I see families of companies, global families stepping up in an important role, which is if you have a less uniform view of what path to take forward in climate and so on, the families that understand this topic come with different models, with different capitals, with this systemic point of view and a challenge. Thank you very much, Lu. And besides this positive side, maybe another challenge that we've been discussing on Friday, we discussed a lot on that. How can we reduce the risk exposition regarding potential losses? And also, how can we improve the instruments for insurance and mechanisms for risk shareability? So we conclude right now, and I agree with you here as well, Luciana. There's a big difference between what is happening in the world in this debate. We concluded right now this work of creating de-risking hubs, specialized and regional. And here in Brazil, we have a discussion on how to increase the coverage, how to increase the access to the product. And I want to understand from you, Claudia, what kind of changes in this new role of yours, now thinking about the insurance market, what kind of regulation shifts, institutional shifts, or market shifts would be needed so that these instruments may become a more day-to-day part of the structuring of transition investments and not the exception? And what is the specific role that the insurance sector in Brazil would like and should have here in this process?
Poderia, gostaria ou deveria? Deveria. Bom, boa tarde a todos. Vamos lá. Mas antes eu vou pegar aqui pouquinho o que a Luciana falou, porque eu já fui mais otimista, né? Mas hoje eu estou pouco preocupada, porque eu acho que os investimentos, além de toda a questão geopolítica e tudo que você colocou, a gente está no momento em que adaptação e descarbonização têm que caminhar juntos, né? Porque a gente estava lá na London Climate Week lá, e vimos o que aconteceu, e assim, isso vem acontecendo cada vez mais. Já peguei incêndios na Europa há uns 3 anos atrás, só que antes era um a cada 10 anos, 15 anos, agora todo ano, e aqui no Brasil nem se fala, e a gente não sabe as consequências do El Niño, que a gente sabe que vai acontecer, já estamos vendo aqui que já começou, mas a situação pode piorar, e como a Patrícia bem colocou, a proteção
But as Patricia said,
muito baixa, né?
The protection is very low, and we can see that the protection here in Brazil is 9%. But concerning my issue, protection should, and so on. Well, I'll use my hat of bank. I've worked for more than 30 years in banks. How do we see insurances? We work in several finance projects and so on. We had the risk matrix and we took that issue in terms of project conception. Here in Brazil, we didn't see that. Only when we were taking part with other banks and we looked at the whole package, and there isn't this connection, especially now in terms of climate and project risking. And we represent insurance companies nowadays, and we work together with the productive sector to show what insurance has, which is risk management. When we have high risks, when you see the risk grid and see what happens, not a cooperative insurance, it's where can you have a risk management, and it goes beyond. You might have an analysis of the project's risk, and it can contribute making these projects more feasible, more fundable. And I wish that banks could look at the insurance companies as risk mitigators. Many times I talk to some banks, what if this and that happens and I could execute? No, it's not a bond. With the new insurance law, we have all the regulatory framework within a single law, making it clear how long does the insurance company has to pay and so on. The second step is banks looking at the insurance companies as partners. It's amazing because some banks have insurance companies within it, but they don't see it that way. We need to go beyond the climate risks. So just to point out some cases, it's important to bring some concrete issues. Last year, in the Climate Week, we were looking what insurances were part of the panels. What's the risk? I want to have an insurance situation, and do we have insurance companies? Yes, we do. Some of them are working for insurance for all the carbon process, not from non-carbon performance to fires to several mitigators that can help us leverage RBS in Brazil. So we're bringing several discussions with these companies that are well developed, and there are some cases being studied here. As we show some cases, we will be able to scale this so that insurance companies are close to the projects. We've been working to take insurance to small municipalities in Brazil. Now we don't have risks in terms of major forces such as in Rio Grande do Sul, but when we take adaptation for municipalities showing risks, we have a partnership with São Paulo Via and our union to show the climate risks, and we take more security to investment. So we're working this adaptation phase for projects and municipalities. When we see the project, we see the cash flow. Usually there's no insurance in terms of commodity prices, and the insurance can help there, but we can take the insurance sector to see the climate risks involved in that project, such as some banks are already doing it. They're already looking for the climate risk and turn that project more adaptable with the more resilient infrastructure to climate change. So you have to work in both things, mitigate risks and to turn both these projects more resilient to climate. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, so even if you have a certain contract, if you have a flooding or something, and that's works for all kinds of projects, and you won't have income on revenue, and how are you going to pay the bank? And that's already happening. So I think that the insurance sector can be seen as a consultant to mitigate climate risks and the risking of the projects. And that's how I'd like the banks to see. And this is what we've been looking for and working on. Thank you. Very nice, very well. It's very interesting because you brought this optimism, this more pessimistic view. Since I started working with climate, I became Ariano Suassuna, this Brazilian author, and he says that we should be more realistic because it's quite pendular. Sometimes we are more optimistic. Some days we want to give up. Well, when we look at the insurance point of view, really scares me the amount of business opportunities that we lose. When you launch the report last year, it already showed that we had a very low penetration. This 9% is January in terms of agro, it's a lot less. It's 3%, and it dropped to 1.5%. So we need more and more of these products in the market, and the penetration is going down. So we launched last year a report called Resilience Returns, showing the non-covered resilience. But in case of Brazil, it's really serious because the level of coverage is close to zero. And when you talked about this, the amount of the lack of fertilizers with the Hormuz Strait, we're going to see this in the second semester, and it's really concerning. And when you need to change the pricing. Who's paying this account in Brazil? The producer and consumer. Because of the interest rate increases, the insurance is not on that, reaching that. So really the interest rate really increased. But as a producer, they'll transfer that to the price of the product. And going beyond the rural, this interest issue is really concerning. As Luciana said, we could have a scarcity of capital and we'd compete with the government bonds. Okay, the banks are going to the green and the insurance company could issue a green bond. The problem is the interest. When we have 8%, what's the return the project should give you? And for instance, we have a capital and function fund and pension funds, they don't compete. So we should keep on working, mitigating risks. And I see Luciana, for instance, looking for good projects. And we've been doing our project with insurance companies, doing our work, but this interest rate is it's a really hard obstacle, and we need to think about the lifespan of the companies. We have 10 minutes now. We'll get a few questions so that they can comment very briefly, and then we can complete, because I promised that we would end at 4:40. Who would like to start with questions? I have several here, so if you're shy, I came here bringing a lot of questions. If you have a question, raise your hands. Everybody's really reflective now. Our system is bugging. No questions? Okay, I have a few. We talked about interest rates. People really disappointed and not so much interest. Okay, as we've started talking, oh, there's a comment there.
Boa tarde, Flávia Teixeira.
Good afternoon. Flávia Teixeira from India. Yes, we have Luciana and Claudia talking about insurance, and Luciana from Flying Rivers. We were presented not for Engie, but for a pool of stakeholders, a project called Securitization of Flying Rivers in Brazil. This was presented to IPE, to the Water National Agency, and several players in Brazil, thinking about a mechanism to have a fund that invests in delaying a possible role that the flying rivers in Brazil have. So the electrical sector is really relevant, and there are people from Harvard involved looking at this, looking at deforestation with a very sophisticated, in a very sophisticated way. We only know the amount of deforestation with the very technological instruments and technology, and the whole agro system in Brazil is totally impacted in Brazil. I don't know if you've heard about this. Do you think this makes sense to have some mechanisms such as this investment to leverage a more strategic case, thinking about the function of flying rivers?
Temos mais alguma pergunta? Que daí eu já devolvo para eles aqui, ó, uma ali.
Any other question? I'm Marina from Perspectives from the Leadership of Private Sector. I saw in the COP30 that work that was done in several debates. What's the plan for SAMSEC for this year? What will insurance companies do for this COP31? And also in terms of prevention for disasters. If we saw what happened in Rio Grande do Sul, if they had insurance, things would be different. Thank you. We have the question of Flavia and Marina. A third question, then we'll close. I will complement with a question that has to do with both questions. It's about this risk allocation issue. You talked a little bit about this, but there's an issue. The flying rivers are really important. The hydroelectric companies risk, and a question that I hear: who pays the bill of each one of those risks, and how should they be absorbed by the agents? What's the role of the international, local companies, investors, and the companies? How can we redistribute these risks in a way that we can have a more efficient allocation without socializing losses? Because today losses are focused on those who produce and consume, but we are not investing in the reduction of those risks. Providing the example of flying rivers, of the agro business, how can we allocate this in a more efficient way? I didn't know, Flávia, the project of flying rivers. I thought it was really interesting. Thank you for the comments. I'm going to look for it. It's symbolic of flying rivers, isn't that? I loved it. When we created Flying River, the name Flying Rivers, it had this impact of flying rivers in all the region of Latin America. And now recently I was reading about it. Now you have the flying river. The factors in China was not a reality in the past, but because of climate effects, we started having flying rivers in China that have the impact that we have in agro and business and the electrical sector. So it's very poetical.
Mas talvez pegando aqui, Paty, para o teu ponto, eu acho que cada vez mais eu vou pegar talvez risco diferente mais vinculado ao
Brasil. I'll get a different risk linked to Brazil. When we attract foreign capital to Brazil, the point 1, 2, 3, and 10 for emerging countries such as Brazil is the exchange issue, and the Treasury created the bid that brought the hedge mechanism, and we as Flying Rivers created a broader mechanism, and it's the first of its kind. We are launching a fund for Flying Rivers as a second fund, a mechanism for foreign investors, for loss for effect in the fund. So it's a totally innovative. We're going to the October fund. Once it's approved, it can be cascaded to other projects. I'm talking about this because we need to be creative to create mechanisms that can mitigate and isolate risks. With the first loss mechanisms, deal with different issues, risks of currency and things like that, but it brings certain discomfort for those who are bringing that protection. The difference of these different risks, the segmentation of different risks allowed us to bring new possibilities for Brazil. Just to bring an example. And I need to leave because I have a different commitment and we're just closing. Claudia, I'll be brief. In terms of Flying Rivers, we heard about it. We had a meeting with certain scientists who talked about it. We are light years behind on this issue. And another issue that is important to talk about is that we've been working with SUSEP with the catastrophe insurance. There's a short, mid, and long-term issues, and we've been talking to a few senators. They have some projects to work with FUNCAP and bring FUNCAP to invest in the private sector so that we can have catastrophe results pre and post disasters. An issue that we talked about is some IRLs are starting to begin, but more than that, we've been working close to municipalities and states so that we can look to insurances to be protected, and we have a risk layerization because the refunding or the government pays to pay on the other end. So at the COP, we're doing a partnership with our counterparty in Turkey, and we'll work with international insurance companies. It won't be like Belém, but it will be a partnership led by our counterpart in Turkey. So we'll have events. Probably it will be close to the blue zone, green zone. We'll see. But they're leading that. It was very good. They heard from us. We went there. SIMSEG had periodical meetings, and we've been working on this subject. Just as we met the Flying River concept, one of the issues that we have in several mechanisms that group this result and environmental issue concerning several interventions is that you could find the counterparts, the proper counterparts, So it seems that as you can keep the integrity of flying rivers, you need public interventions in different levels. The Brazilian government is one of the most indicated counterparts to organize this, and of course, the public bonds are moving towards it in terms of sustainability issues. But when we see a recent report of World Bank talking about green fiscal reform, it brings some interesting suggestions on how you transform the federal transferences bit by bit. They have a populational criteria, sometimes an educational criteria, but also placing some environmental issues in these transferences. Once you can link these federal transferences to reaching goals in subnational perspectives, you can issue bonds that deal with this final result. And there's a problem with the liquid carbon. What can guarantee that that specific project cannot be harmed by another project that is harming in a different basin?
Muito interessante aí a explorar. E aí, o outro
ponto que eu queria colocar é essa. Another thing that I like to state is that we should balance ambition and looking for concept proofs. For instance, in terms of insurance, when you look at Rio Grande do Sul and other municipalities that are facing flooding possibilities, how many households are covered with insurance against flooding? Because if they lose everything, they go after the state go after the federal, and then you end up the same way. But you end up not structuring these issues.
Aumentar a cobertura, das famílias e empresas com subsídio
público. And we can work with public subsidies, and we could explore with the participation of the private sector and private issues.
E aí combinar isso, e aí isso vai gerar muito dado.
And this could generate several issues, and with that you can create new possibilities.
Do soberano e tudo. Então, é a gente construindo exatamente
isso. And we should build exactly that. Maybe that's not possible for today, but let's launch the Flying River bonds. But we work on for that result.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you very much. The Musa from SB COP, and there is a whole block for insurance within the SB COP, within the finance axis. There was a contribution from Senasec as well, and that SB COP as here, it will be very present in Turkey as well, and we hope to have your presence there as well, because we had Brazilian presence in COP here, but more than ever, we need our presence abroad as well to attract these investments here, to ensure that these projects will become a reality, and we use and become more realistic, hopeful, and do business, especially reflecting a model that will grow our GDP and bring income for the population. Thank you very much. We would like to thank Patricia Elling, the mediator of this panel, and also our panelists. In the name of TNI, we would like to thank everybody that were with us present in person here and also remotely. We ask those who made use of simultaneous translation equipment to give back to the place where it was withdrawn. We wish you a very good night and a great São Paulo Climate Week 2026.